Kunlein Avlat Gemara. Today's daf is daf Yud Aleph Amud Aleph. It's Shivas of Tamas Nitcha. We're up to the Mishnah. So the Mishnah says Hagiyatis, that a woman who's a Giyatis or a Shavua. So the last Mishnah we learned about was that a woman who was a widow, but she only merely got engaged, or she was divorced from engagement, she's still considered a psula, and all the din of a psula apply. So she's entitled to 200 mark of a psula, and so too the husband can have a claim of tainus psula. Now he says a giyatis, somebody who converted, or a shuya, or somebody who's taken captive, or a shivcha, somebody's a maid, shenivdu, if they were redeemed. So redeemed refers to the shuya, and gairu refers to giyatis. And Vishinishtachru was redeemed. Now the Rishonim actually ask why it says Hagiyatis Shinis Gairu. Shouldn't say a Goya who's Megayer. So the Ritva says, interesting, that once they became Jewish, we don't want to remind them that they were a Goya in the past. In a way, it's sort of for them it's a bit insulting. So therefore, we call them Giyatis. The Chidah brings that a Gay is a goy who already had a Yiddish and Neshama inside them. So they were never really a goy. They were always a potential ger. We had in Mariavamas, if he doesn't bring it down, but we had in Mariavamas that a goy will also get, a ger will get punished. Why didn't you become a ger earlier? What kind of punishment? For what for? No mitzvah for a goy to become a ger, because he already had an Yiddish, or she had her Yiddish and Neshama already, so you should have done it earlier. Anyway, so all of these people, or Shalish Tachra, that was liberated, all these people, we believe that at the period while they were taken captive, or shivcha or a goy, they might have had relations. So we don't assume that they're a psula. But if it all happened before 3 years old, it doesn't matter, because the hymen would have grown back. Is Kesuvos Masayim v'yeshen times so. These are also Kesuvos $200, and there's a tiny psula, just like in the previous mission. Says the Gemara, a ger cotton, a young ger, madbilin oisoi aldas bezin. A young ger, Bezdin can take responsibility and make him a ger. We're talking about a case, according to Rashi, he has no father, because of the father, where Rashi learns if he has a father, you don't need Bezdin the consent. The father can make them a yid. But if there's no father and the mother brings him to Bezdin, according to Taisus and other Rishonim, even if there's no father or mother, the Bezdin can decide to make them a yid as well. Or others say that even the parents are alive, but the parents are not interested in becoming Yidden, but they want their kids to become Yidden, they can do that. So, my Kamasha said, when we Bezin could take on the responsibility of making Yidden, as if it's a good thing for them, it's a mirror. Is that what it's all about? You're telling us it's a chus for the kids. The kids are not really mature enough to make these decisions, but we do the right thing for them, even though they're not around. Is that what you're trying to tell us? Is that the chiddush? So the Gemara asks, Tanina, we learned that you can be zoche for somebody even if they're not around. You just can't harm them if they're not around. So what's the chiddush? The Gemara says, Mautim, I would have thought a goy, it's not a good thing for a goy to become a yid. They'd rather be a goy because life is easier, so many less restrictions. So Kaimlon, we have a rule, the Evid, we have a rule by an Evid. If somebody writes a get and gives it to a shliach to pass on to his Evid, we say that the mayor says it's bad for the Evid, and therefore he can change his mind to the last second. According to Chachamim, it's good for the Evid, and he can have a mind. But even according to Chachamim, it's still better for the Eved to be free, but there's a bigger advantage of being a slave, because then he has access to all of these shvachis, and he can live a very promiscuous life. But it's still what do you call it? Avada hefkei nichalei. Eved enjoys being hefker. So too, so we would have thought that a goy would rather be a goy than a yid. Mashallah, that no, that is still considered as chus for him. The honey meaning God all the time. A God adult who already enjoyed life doesn't want to give it up. Of a cotton's chus for a youngster who doesn't enjoy life yet, it's a chus to become a yid. It's chus to become a yid. So that's what we're telling you here. That is a chus the Bezdin can take on young children and make them yid, or as well the father can, or the mother can. According to other Rishonim, the mother can do it as well without the Bezdin. Leima misayele. I'll prove it to you. Hagiyay mamish. Hagiyay is a shuya shivka shenibdin is guy in a chus of under 3 years old. My love. So who made them Yidden? Then they were under 3 years old. Atvilinu das Bezin. It was done with the knowledge of Bezin, and therefore we see Bezin could do it on their behalf because it's chus. No proof. This is talking about where the parents joined them, and the nichelu my David avon, and therefore they're happy with what their father does, or whatever the father does. When it's a family unit, they're happy, and therefore the nichelu my David, the father does, nothing to do with the bezin. From here, there's no support for bezin. And the Rishonim say nichelu my avon is even if the father himself does not convert to a Yiddishkeit, he just does it for his children. It's good enough. Big machek is Rishonim. This kind of a ger at the young age, the bar mitzvah by a bezin or by parents, is it mahatayr or is it only midrabanan? Because you're telling us it's a schus for the child. Rashi says here, umagoy b'yayin kosher. If he touches wine, it's kosher. Seems from Rashi, the whole isser of stam yain, if a guy touches it midrabanan, and Rashi says, we know what a yid is. What's Rashi telling us? Rashi just said that if he marries a woman, she needs a, or something. If it's a girl, she marries a yid, she's married something, or other dinim that it may be. But Rashi says here that that's only midrabanan. So the whole gate is only midrabanan. Other Rishonim hold it's mahatayr. I'll soon bring you one of the proofs, one or another. But there are 2 issues here. One issue here is that a child, if schus, why does it work schiyus? Generally, Taisus learns but Mitzia here that schiyah mitam shlichus. In other words, we say, had you known about this, definitely you would have appointed this person to be your shliach because it's a good thing for you. So schiyah mitam shlichus. Now, since we know that a child has no shlichus, has no schiyah, so how can you be zoich on behalf of the child under bar mitzvah or under bas mitzvah? That's question number 1. And how can that be? Question number 2 is it's a goy. How can and a goy definitely has no shlichus? We learn it from Truma, we learn to Imar Kedusha, second parak, that a goy has no shlichus. Ma'atem bnei b'yishol b'mitzvah. So the goy can do it, and we had it before as well. So how can you be zoich on behalf of a goy? Those are 2 general fundamental questions that everybody deals with in this Gemara here. So the kids of the Ritva and others trying to learn Taka from here. There's a choice of Kufay, Sim Kufay talks about Barichas, that Tzchi has nothing to do with Shlichus. Tzchi is Exeris HaKasav. That the Torah says that you have a Milan Gemara Kedushin that Mebez there. How do we know that? So that Shlichus has nothing to do with Shlichus. In fact, this is a proof. You can be Zoich on behalf of a child even though they have no Shlichus. So that's how they eliminate this problem. Taisus wants to say that when it's a schus gomer, when do we say that child has no shlichus? When it's good for him, but it's a little bit bad for him. For example, truma. Truma, how do you know how much a child really wanted to give? Maybe want to give more, want to give less. Because chita achas pater, like Shmuel says, you don't know. Maybe 1 piece a week he wants to give. Maybe he's very stingy. So we don't know. So therefore, it's ksas chayva. But where it's 100% schus, it's good. And here for a guy to become a yid at a young age is 100% schus. So then there is a schus. And as far as the question about a goy, we say that the schus is a chiyah, or we say that it's like the rule, like I'll have more gita v'yodei boing vasacha. They come, 2 things come at the same time here also. Since when he converts or she converts, they become a yid, and as a yid there is shlichus. So we say that it happens at the same time. The schiyah and the geiros both coincide with each other; they happen concurrently, and therefore it's good enough. Others say that the beneficiary of this is when the person becomes a yid, and as a yid it can be accepted. So therefore it's good enough. Anyway, furthermore, why is there that issue? We'll see in a minute. So the Gemara continues. When they become an adult, they can protest. They can say, "When I become a yid," and then they're no longer a yid. And this is the question. According to many Rishonim, if we say that's some HaTorah, that it became a ger, what do you mean you can undo it afterwards? Once you're a ger, you're a ger. If you say it's Rabbanon, so hey mamru, they say, look, we give you an option at the age of 12 or the age of 13, you can undo it. But if it's HaTorah, how can you undo it? So that's one of the proofs they bring it's Midrabbanon. Others say that no, it's HaTorah, and this shows that all along they were never gay in the first place. That means all, according to some Sefer and others, all the wine that they touched in the last 7-8 years, now it's considered stamien, and we have to throw it out. Others want to learn that if you're meiche, from now on you're no longer a yid. You were yid till now, but from now on you're no longer a yid. Another thing is you have to be a godel to be meiche. So when exactly meiche? If you're 1 second a godel, it's too late. You're already 100% a yid. And if you do it a minute before your bar mitzvah, bas mitzvah, it's not good. It has to be only when you're a gadol, when you're old enough. So what do you mean higdilu yachayim? When exactly? So some of the Shayim say he's talking about that a couple of days before already you behave as if you're a goy, and then you continue on afterwards. So therefore, we know that you want to be a goy. Others say no. It means that you have to notify the person that you're becoming a yid, and that you have a choice now, and you notify them just as if you're going through Geiris right now, and then they could choose. If you know them a year later, 2 years later, that's the moment you have to notify them. It doesn't happen automatically. And there's a whole discussion here. How come doesn't mention anything about Kabbalah's mitzvahs, just as Matbilin? So I want to bring a proof from here that b'di'evet, if a person converts and you did not tell them about mitzvahs, they're still converted 100%. Others say that no, that the Gemara doesn't mention it, but it's definitely you did it already. Or others say when they have the opportunity, that's when you do the Kabbalah's mitzvahs. That's when you tell them a mitzvahs, and then they have to decide one way or another. Says the Gemara, you tell me what's the mitzvah, they can go ahead and protest them as a question. It's about a question. Hagiyah to convert, v'hashvuya, or the captive of Shivcha, Shenibdush, the guy who's talking about so Yami just says, less than 3 years old, you make a Kesuvos Daf, they get $200. Now, the obvious question is, you divorce them, and you can give them $200. But what happens if they decide to protest? Come out that they're a guy all the time. Why do you have to give them $200? You're going to give them a ksuba, and then they'll revert back to being a guy, and you helped her out as a guy to live your life. Why? Chigad says you're right. That you wait until she grows up. Says the Gemara. So what? As soon as she grows up, she can walk out. The Kivon, Gemara says, no. Kivon Shigdila, once she becomes 12. Shah Achaz, one moment, V'lay mix, and then protest, when we say that you have to give it $200, not at the age of 10 she walks out on you. You have to give it $200. No. So she's over 12 years old. She decided to become a Yid. And then, and the moment that she decided to become a Yid, I said too late, she's 100% a Yid. Then afterwards, you divorce, you have to give her the full ksuva, the full $200. Mostly, that's a bias question. So a bias question from our Mishnah from Ksuva. Rava asks a similar question, but he asks a question from Eilunitis. He asks a question from we'll learn the third page. He says the following girls, she yeshlen knas. When it comes to this knas by a girl who was seduced and all that, it's talking about a naira. Well, machlekes by Tan that applies as well, but it does not apply to a girl. It applies to a naira who's between the age of 12 and 12 and a half. So somebody had a relation with Mazeres and Sinukusis, and the same kind of case we had these 3 cases here, that they converted or whatever it was to take a liberate from captive or redeemed from captivity. Was younger than 3, which means even if they had any relations, they got they're back to a psula. Yeshlen knas, they're entitled to a full knas, so the Torah enables them the full knas of 50 kesef that we learned, if they were raped and so on. And the Chiddush in the Mishnah is because it says that the first thing is V'loise Elisha, that he has to marry her, even though Mamzeres he cannot marry, and nevertheless he has to pay the knas. That's what the Gemara will say in the third page. Now, if you're going to say Higdilu, you tell me then what? That they grow up, they can be moicha, yahabinu le knas, you give her a knas, and then she'll give her a knas at the age of 10, and then she'll go back and say the the age of 12, whatever it is, the ochlav azlav she'll continue as a goy, so we're going to make you penalize you, so help her out if she decides to become a goy again. No, this only happened after she's bas mitzvah. Nami she can still protest, but not go out. No, the mother understood that the rest of her life she can decide at the age of 15 to walk out. So why in the world are you paying her class? We answer, just like by Abaya. It's not for the rest of her life she can just change her mind. She has a moment in time when she becomes bas mitzvah, so either to make a determination to become a yid, to make or to go back to become a goy. But that's it. After that moment, she's a yid. If she decides to behave like a goy, she's a Yisrael woman. She's a full din of Yisrael, just a Yisrael woman. So Abai asked from Ksuva and Rava asked from Knas, but they're basically asking the same question and getting the same answer. First, they thought that forevermore she could change her mind, and answer no, you can't. Abai doesn't ask the question from Knas. Hasam Knasa in the time. What's the reason? The chayta shouldn't benefit. In other words, the question which you're buying Rava is, what is the real purpose of a knas? Is the real purpose of a knas so that the person, the victim, should get the money, or is the perpetrator should never do this again? So Abaye felt that no, the main purpose is that the person shouldn't do it again. So what do I care if becomes a goy, and so what? The main thing, you're a yid, and we don't want you to have this kind of behavior. So what's wrong? It doesn't bother me that she ends up being a goy and using the money. The knas is for you. And Rava might have held that no, it's for both. The knas is for him, but also equally let her the victim, benefit from it as well. So it's a general question. When you penalize somebody, what's the main purpose of the penalty? To penalize the perpetrator or to give some compensation to the victim? Interesting debate. And Rabbi Lamak Abaye, why don't I say by Ksuba? At the time of Kalaba ain't a Same by Ksuba. What's the main thrust of the Ksuba? That she should receive the alimony, or that he should not just at a whim, say to the wife, I want to divorce you, throw it out of the house, because he'll rethink, because he has to reconsider it because it costs him money. Is the main thing to protect him, is to protect her from him, or the main thing is that she should have a benefit? And again, if the main thing is to protect her from him, that men should behave, then we don't care if later on she decides not to become a goy. In the meantime, he behaved like a normal person. Again, interesting debate. Mishnah. If a gadol, here gadol means a 9-year-old, could be learned already in your bumpers that a 9-year-old is capable of having beer. So if a gadol has relations with a kind of girl under 3 years old, where her beer doesn't count, and the psum come right back. Or a cotton under 9 years old, shabalak of a girl over 3 years old. Mukas AIDS, or a girl who's mukas AIDS, which means that she had never had relations with another person, but it's an expression. A stick was hit over there and it caused her time to rip, or anything which was aggravated, or she was very energetic, caused her hymen to break. In all these cases, Rameir holds Kesuvos Daf, as long as it wasn't done by a person, and a cotton and a kana don't count. The ksuva is the full $200. And Chachamim say no. Chachamim argued so far in the Mishnah. The only thing that they're arguing about is mukas eitz. They say that a mukas eitz ksuvas mana. They say that if it's a mukas eitz who didn't grow back, then the ksuva is a mana is $100 because she's changed. She's no longer a psula. The fact is she's no longer a psula. Then the Mishnah continues, a continuation, the contrast to the previous Mishnah where they were a widow from engagement. Here, she's a widow from marriage, even though they never consummated the marriage. Psula, almana, grush chlutzim in a suyin. Ksuvas mana, the ksuva is $100. Why? Because even though they didn't have any relations, you know that they were married already, so in your mind, you can't say, oh, I expect her to be a psula. And the England time of psula, you can't come along with a tiny, I didn't find any psula, because you should have expected the worst. Okay, so therefore she gets the entitlement of $100 because we treat her like she was already a bu'ula, and there's no time of psula. Now, why would you have time of psula? What do you gain? She's only already getting 100. Because you want to take a step further. You'll say that the whole thing was a mekah toss, was a mistake. I thought that she's a psula, and turned out to be she wasn't. So therefore, I want the whole marriage to unravel. I don't want to pay her anything. We don't say that. Hagiyotis, but Hagiyotis, and a shvuya, and a shivcha, shenivdush, and a guy, and a shtachri. You say this, I'm going to show you. If they're older than 3 years old, you knew, you suspected that they were no longer a psula. The same thing. So ksuvas and mana, they're entitled to 100, and the ain't lehen time of psula. There's no time of psula. He says the following: if a cotton under the age of 9 had had relations with a girl over 3 years old, also mukas eitz, we treated it. So even though he's a cotton was under 9 years old. So even though we said in the Mishnah, cotton, is not really beer, nevertheless, we treat it as if it was a mukas eitz, and it's no different than an eitz. Eitz also is not a person. And therefore, the Rabbanon who argue, and they say in our Mishnah that mukas eitz is entitled to $100, so they would also argue and say that a cotton, that a bar nagdoila, her ksuva from now on is $100. Even though the Mishnah doesn't mention that, the Mishnah seems to say only Rameir says he has entitled to 200, and the Chum only argue on mukas eitz. But we say that Chum also would also hold even a cotton, a bar alagdoila also is reduced to $100. And the same thing is Rashi brings down, a kohen gadol who has to marry a psula cannot marry this girl, even though it was a cotton, a bar alagdoila cannot marry this girl. Says the Gemara, Shmuel disagreed. When he heard that, he said, mukas eitz bebasa. He says the status of mukas eitz does not apply with a cotton of a human being and a gdoila. If you're going to say that a cotton and gdoila is not considered a bula, neither they consider mukas eitz. Other people learn that this argument of Shmuel, not that somebody said their name, but they actually said themselves outright. Cotton and gdoila. Rav says directly, also mukas eitz, no worse than a mukas eitz. And Shmuel says, "Ain't mukas eitz a basa." There's no such thing as mukas eitz between two people. If you're going to tell me that a cut in the ball of is not a bula, then neither is she a mukas eitz. She's just like a psula, and she's entitled to full 200. Mostly Rabbi Ishi has a question. It says, "Na Mishnah Godul Shabalak Tana over 9 over under 3, and a cut in the ball of under 9 with an over 3-year-old. Mukas eitz and a mukas eitz was saying you made it. Chacham argue only by mukas eitz. So what's Mukas 8, the Kesuvos is $100. And so clearly the Rabban only argue regarding Mukas 8. What would the Rabban hold when it comes to a cotton al bolog daily? She's entitled to frozen time of $200. So it's a question on Rav. Amar Rav says, this is how Rav learns the Mishnah. This is how Rav learns the Mishnah. Godul habo alaktana b'leiklum. Everyone agrees. If a godul b'alaktana, she's entitled to the full 200 because under 3, it'll grow back. The Bachar Mekan, because anything less than 3 years old is combination etzva b'ayin dummy. So like placing a finger in the eye makes you tear, but it's not just one tear. The more tears will come out. Same thing here. The hymen tears, it comes back. However, there's no argument. But now, put comma, full stop. Now the next part of the mission is the cotton habar lagdela. In the next case, with the cotton under 9, the girl over 3, also mukas eitz has the same status as the mukas eitz. And what is the din by mukas eitz? There's an argument of Meir Chachamim. So it means the Meir Chachamim argue on 2 cases. For mukas eitz, gufa put to the Meir Rabbanan. The Meir says the mukas eitz entitled full 200, and the Rabbanan say only 100. So in fact, they're arguing on 2 cases. They're arguing also on the case of cutting the ball of doila, because the hymen doesn't grow back. So cutting the ball of doila, and therefore it's treated like a mukas eitz. And whatever you hold of mukas eitz, Rabbanan hold 100. Same thing by cutting ball of doila. Rabbi Machlekes. Now we have a Machlekes from Rabbi Chama, and Rabbi Chama says Machlekes. When does a Meir Chacham argue? You knew that she was in this situation, whatever the situation is. When you wrote the Kesuvos, you knew that she was a mukas eitz, for example. So the Meir says, look, I hold, since you knew that she was a mukas eitz, it's no different than Madame La Begera, since it was not done by human intervention. So just like a begeris, once she's over 12 and a half, you don't expect her to have a hymen, or even do expect her, it's not a taina, because a lot of girls lose it, as you get older. So therefore, or her blood, she loses the blood as well. So therefore, it's not a taina. So same thing here, mukas eitz is the same as, the main thing is it was not done by another human being. And therefore, we say that, like they entitled full 200 measures, something here, entitled full 200. Rabbanan Medam Rabbanan say no. Begeris is very, very different. By Begeris, nothing happened, as we'll see. But by over here, the fact is that it was a mukas eitz. Something happened. So therefore, you're no longer considered a psula. You're a step lower. You're a mukas eitz. So you get 100. And I'll explain the logic. Why is it compared to a Begeris, the Damil Bula? We compared. Let's compare it to Bula. Bula is Abba Maisa. Bula, there was a human intervention. Bidei Adam. Hollis Abba Maisa Bidei Adam over here, just like a Begeris, nothing happened with another person. Same thing here. That a Muka says nothing happened with another person. And the Rabbanan, and according to Rav, a kid under 9 years old is not like a person. And Rabbanan, Idamdu Lola Bula. Rabbanan, why don't you compare it to Bula? The Damil, they compare it to Bula, the Damil Begeris. Why don't you compare it to Begeris? So they say, and we compared Begeris lois abed b'maisa. A Begeris, nothing happened. Forget about the human, nothing happened. Klal. Hoyis abed b'maisa. Here something happened, and because something happened over here, therefore it's no longer a mukazesi. You get 100. But says Rabbi Machama, let's say he had no idea that she was a mukas eitz, and you married her thinking she's a psula. Turned out to be she's a mukas eitz. Then you can say the whole thing's a mekach tos. I thought I'm marrying a psula, and the marriage is undone, and you owe her nothing. Everyone will agree that there's a mekach tos, and therefore you don't even owe the $100. That's Rabbi Machama's version. If you didn't know, you were fooled, deceived, and then the whole marriage unravels. Says the Gemara, Moshe Rav has a question. It says, well, these are Mishnahs later on. The next few Mishnahs are going to be into the next parak. The next few Mishnahs are going to be that where he makes one claim and she makes another claim. His claims are always maybes. He doesn't know really what happened, but he's saying, suppose this happened. Suppose he did it willingly after he got engaged. And she always says, with a veracity, Bari, I know what happened, and I disagree with what you said. So the question is, who do you believe, her or him? And we're talking about taking money away from somebody else. And taking money away from somebody else, we need quite compelling proof. So one of the missions is as follows. She claims Mukas Eitzani. She says, I'm Mukas Eitz. You're right. I'm not absolute, but I was a Mukas Eitz. I'm entitled to a Mukas Eitzes. Who I'm a no, and he says, no, I don't believe it. I believe that you had some kind of relations with somebody. And in the case where there's only one suffix, if it's double suffix, okay, so it's a double suffix. And then questionable, so they can still stay married together. The question is, this double suffix, is that strong enough for her to take a ksuba? But in the case where there's only one suffix, it's the wife of a kohen. There's only one suffix. Was it before or after? Because once they're engaged, it doesn't matter whether it was done by force or willingly. So the question is, who do you believe? If you believe him, then she has nothing. If you believe her, then there's only mukazait. She's entitled to mukazaitis. Is Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Lezer say ne'emen? They say we believe her. Rabbi Shua will argue. He'll say we don't believe her. We believe him. Not that we believe him, but no, she doesn't have enough proof. So we believe her. So what's clear from here? She's saying mukas eitzani. In other words, that's what she told him in the beginning, which means that when he married her, he thought that she was a psula. Turned out to be that no, she wasn't. So Rabbi Gamliel, and yet. He's been deceived. The whole thing should unravel, and it says clearly here that no, the marriage continues, and she's believed. She's believed, right? So the Mishnah is talking about he thought that she was a psula. Turned out to be she wasn't. He comes running to court, and she said, no, it was a mukas eitz. So we see that what she's entitled to whatever mukas eitz is, and we believe her, meaning she's entitled to whatever mukas eitz is entitled to. $100, $200, and Muhammad said in this case the whole thing unravels. Otherwise, if she gets nothing, what do you mean you believe her? And then for what? She's not married to him anymore, and she gets no ksuba. So obviously, that's what it means. Ella, my Rabbi sort of disagrees. He says, first, the Rabbi himself will change his mind twice, or change his mind again as usual. Ella, my says, Rabbi, Bain Hikba, Bain like this whole machlekes doesn't make a difference. But he thought that he knew that she was a mukazait. He didn't know. Doesn't matter. Let Rameya, she's entitled to Masayim, and Rabban says as follows. Rameya makes no difference. Rabban say depends. Hikba, if you knew all along she's a mukazait, mana. She gets $100, not 200, going to make 100. But if you didn't know, was deceived, then you get nothing. So that Mishnah later on that says in the menace, they all follow Rameir. Rameir holds it makes no difference, deceived and not deceived. Anyway, Rameir holds nothing happens. So what's the difference if you knew he didn't know? Makes no difference. He's still entitled to full 200 because of no human being involved. Therefore, because you're entitled to full 200, which means it doesn't matter. What's the difference if you knew he didn't know? But according to Chamim, it does matter. You're no longer entitled to 200, you're entitled to 100. It does matter. So if he didn't know, he was deceived, and therefore it unravels. If he didn't know, then she's entitled to $100. The Mishnah that says that she's believed, obviously, and even though he didn't know, obviously follows her man. Then the Gemara says, but Rav himself changed his mind. He changed his mind. As we'll know, how do we see that? The Tanya we learn, Keitzad, Haitzah, Shemra. What's the idea if he's Maiti Shemra? The din is when a guy comes along and says, oh, my wife was on it, turned out to be that it wasn't, they brought witnesses and the whole thing's not true, it was a lie. And she gets stoned if it was true because there were two Adim, turned out to be the Adim were liars, then the husband has to pay $100 besides the punishment of Adim. So if somebody's Maiti Shemra, I didn't find any psulim to your daughter. And if there were witnesses that there was mezana, and what really happens is there were witnesses, she gets stoned. But if there were edim that they were mezana, is yesh lo ksuba. If there were mezana, there's a ksuba mana. There's a ksuba of $100. Now, before we go further, I don't understand. Im yesh edim shezinza tacht baskili. If there were edim that she was mezana while they were engaged, then she gets killed. What do you mean she gets a ksuba of $100? She gets killed. This is what you meant to say. It was a bit cryptic. If there were witnesses, then you're right, she gets skilla. But zinsa mikara, if the witnesses say she was mazana before they got engaged, then yesh la ksuba mana. Then she's entitled to a ksuba of $100. Okay, so if there were witnesses that she was already mazana, but before they got engaged, she's entitled to $100. She's no longer psula, she's a bula. And then the Gemara continues. Shesik made a comment. Zoysa made from here we learn out. So you thought that she was a psula. But Imtzah's bula turned out to be she was a bula. Witnesses came later and said, by the way, she's mazana before you got engaged. So the witnesses come along and say she's a bula. Yes, look, there's a ksuba $100. You cannot say mekach tos, I didn't know, and the whole thing should unravel and get nothing. No, still married, but your ksuba has been reduced from 200 to 100. Umosiv Rav Nachman, and Rav Nachman asks the question on that. It says, "Hanoisis Isha." Somebody marries a woman, didn't find psulim. I met her. She says, "You're right. Misha Rastani and Nasti. I was embarrassed. You should know what happened after we got engaged, and I was raped. Vinistach for Sadeu. It's like a flood. You bought a field, and afterwards it's flooded. Same thing here. Too bad mazel on you, because it happened after we got engaged, and it was against my will." He says, like, no, he says, maybe no, maybe it happened prior, and therefore, my whole relationship with you was a mistake. The transaction we made was a mistake. The less la klal, and therefore there's no marriage at all. There's no ksuba at all. So we see from what, but if we say that the whole thing was a mekartos, it's not that you're entitled to $100. It's the whole thing unravels. It's a mekartos. So it's a question: how could you tell me that if you thought that she was absolute, came along with us and said that before you even got engaged, she already had relations and therefore she's a bull, and then we say she only gets $100, you get nothing. It was a mekartas. That's a question. The Rabban answered, he said, that's a question. Is it possible? Rab Amram was there. The whole Gedolah Hadar Yosvi. Ki Amar Shel Hashmaita. Rav Shesha said this din that Zoyse Meres from here learned out that it turned out to be, you didn't know this, but turned out to be that she was Mazana beforehand. Then her ksuba was reduced to 100, but it's not a mekartos. And when Rav Shesha said this din, Rab Amram sat there. The whole Gedolah Hadar was sitting there. And they asked that question, this very question you're asking, they asked, and Vishoni, and he answered, my mekartos. Mekartos doesn't always mean that the transaction didn't happen at all, and therefore the ksuba is forfeited, but rather the mekartos means the amount that was stated in the ksuba of $200 is a mistake, and you got to reduce it to 100. Not even Masai. Our money is 100 there is. But and you say less laklal, and you say there's nothing at all. But Omar Rava comes along. Rava says this is going to be our proof. We're going to, from the comment that Rava makes here, we see the Rava has something else. What's the comment? But Omar Rava said, "Man de kamoisi, shapa kamoisi." No, the question is a valid question. And the answer is not, because the word mekartos doesn't sound like that the amount there stated is wrong and you have to restate it. Instead of 200, reduce it to 100. Mekartos always means ligambi, that the transaction, the relationship, the whole thing is based on an error, and therefore there's no longer a relation. It unravels. Mashma. So clearly, Rava holds that if you didn't know, the whole thing unravels. So how can you tell me, Rava, before that you argue with Rambam and you hold that according to Rameir, even the mekartos, nothing happens at all, and here he clearly said that mekartos, the whole thing unravels. So first of all, so how are you going to answer then the saying that we started off saying in the first place? Well, we said that in the Brisa, how you explain the Brisa? It says, I saw Shemra. He said, I didn't find any psulim, and in the Eidim, there's a ksuba $100. When is there a ksuba $100? If there were Eidim that she was Mazana while they were engaged, she gets killed. You're telling me there were Eidim before she got engaged, then there's that's it. The whole marriage is based on deception, and the whole marriage unravels. So when does the Brisa say she gets entitled to $100? Tritz, this is how you should read the Brisa. The Ema say the following. If they were witnesses that they were mezana while they were engaged, beskila. Zinsa miikara, they were Eidim, they were engaged. She was mezana before they got engaged, and obviously she deceived him. He thought she was absolute, says the Rav V'loy. Then we'll say mekartos, the whole thing unravels. Unravels. Then these are the words that were missing in the Brisa. What happens in Nimtzas Mukazaitz? That he thought that she was absolute, turned out to be she's a Mukazaitz. Yesh l'ksuba, she's entitled to a ksuba of $100. So Rava changed his mind. First he thought that he gets nothing, and now we're saying that Rava holds that if it turned out had no idea, no inkling that she was not a psula, and turned out to be she's a mukazaitz, doesn't unravel completely, she still gets a ksuba of $100. Rava said before that according to the Rabbanon, if he had no idea, then there's a mekartos and the whole thing unravels, he has nothing. Rava changed his mind. So the conclusion we have is the following. According to Rambam, if you had no idea that she was not a psula, even as a mukazaitz, the whole thing is a mekartos and it unravels, no psula. The first Rava was, according to Rameir, you're right, because mukazaitz doesn't mean anything, and therefore nothing happens, because nothing happened. Mukazaitz, nothing happened. Why does he have to know? So nothing unravels. According to Rava, in the first way, If he knew, then she's entitled, she's like a mukas eitz, then it's entitled $100. And if he did not know he received, there's a mekatos, it unravels. Because mukas eitz is something. Haraya, you reduce it from 200 to 100. So it is something happened, he should have known. It's a material knowledge and importance. But if he didn't know, it unravels. However, the conclusion is that Rava holds that even if he didn't know, and even though it does reduce from 200 to 100, it doesn't really matter, and therefore it still remains a marriage, and you still give her 100. What happens? Konsa Rishon, we learned. Konsa Rishon, let's say he was married to one person, so she married this guy, and they were going to get married. But there were witnesses that they never consummated their marriage. Or even though they did stay in seclusion, but there were witnesses there that can tell you they were there for 1 minute together in the room. Impossible that anything happened. Okay, then she marries a second guy. He died or he divorced, whatever. She married a second guy. Ein hasheni yochel litin tainas sulim. The second person cannot say, "Oh, I thought she was absolute." Because once she got married, you can no longer say, "Oh, I was sure that she was absolute." Why? Because the first person married, and even though the witnesses there, he could no longer really have the expectation that she was still absolute. So you cannot say make a person all that. Yeah, Amar Rabba. So Rabba says, sorry?
What would her ksuba be in that case?
Oh, so we're saying that she gets the full, what do you call it? Like in our Mishnah says that once she was married already, she was $100. So therefore she's treated like a bull, even though we have witnesses that nothing happened. But the fact that she got married, it's reduced to $100. Amar Rabba says Rabba, Zoyse Meres. So from here we can see the concept of Chesed Sula, if you married someone thinking, in this case, you thought she was Absula because there were witnesses that said that nothing happened. So you thought you relied on the agent, that's pretty strong. And the Nimtzah's Bula turned out to be a Bula. Yes, you can't say, oh, there's a Mekar toss. She's still entitled to the Ksuba of $100. If you decide to divorce her, she's still entitled to the Ksuba of $100. Ravashi says, Ba'alma. So we see there's no mekatos. Ravashi says, generally, I can say, generally speaking, there is such a thing as mekatos. If you thought someone's a psula, turn out to be a bula, it's not that, okay, bula, you get $100. I think we can have an argument. No, it's just like a hikabah, in a way, it's like Rambam Chama. There's an argument, if everything unravels, and she forfeits the entire psula. Over here by Aiden, over here is different because the fact that she got married. And because the fact that she got married is different because you should have known that you should have suspected something happened, But in a case where you never got married, she presents herself as a psula, turned out to be a bula, you can argue that it's a mekar toss, and therefore she loses everything. The Gemara, and what? And furthermore, maybe something happened while they were engaged. So you might ask the question. Why aren't we chayshish that maybe she was in a zana straight away, while they were engaged already, after they got engaged? Amar of Shrabi, we're talking about a case here which is impossible. We're talking about a case here they got engaged, and a minute later they got married. So nothing could have happened. Okay, true. Adam said that after they got married, nothing happened. But how do we know nothing happened between the marriage? While they're engaged. So we're talking about a case here where they were engaged for 1 minute. It was impossible thing to happen after engagement. They got married straight away. And then Adam said nothing happened after they got married.